Well, good morning. Hope you're enjoying your summer so far. I don't know if you noticed anything different in the lobby. Did you guys notice our new mural? Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that was the Leadbetters, Eagle Scouts, for free. They did it for free. Give them a bigger hand than that. Yeah, I was super grateful. Mike and Aaron Johnston designed it, and then they came in and painted it, raised all the money to do that. Just such a cool spot. Maybe now that's where you'll want your family photos when they come on a holiday. Instead of in front of the wooden door, now you can do it in front of I Love You So Much. So we're grateful for that. But today we're going to talk in 30 minutes about something small, the meaning of life. And obviously I'm kidding about it being small. This is a massive topic. And our hope is that we can move you forward in this question. This series is about going to see the greatest counselor in Jesus, finding wisdom from him from some of the things we struggle with. Rather than going to pop psychology, going to YouTube, or talking to people who may not have any idea, why not go to the ultimate counselor, the one who created us, the one who knows us? As a church, we believe the scriptures are an amazing gift from God. They enable us to see who God is, to see who we are in relation to him. And so we're going to explore what the Bible describes is our meaning and our purpose. And for those of you who are exploring, this could be a great way to kind of reset. See, it's easy to see what the world says about cultural churchianity, but what we're talking about is what the scriptures actually teach is our purpose. You see, all of us are created on purpose and with a purpose. God desires to have a relationship with us. He wants us to know him and make him known. And when you say yes to following Jesus, you now have clarity on your purpose in life. In fact, it's a general purpose that's true of every one of us, to become more like Jesus, to bring more of heaven to earth. And sadly, too many people who call themselves Christians don't do that, representing who Jesus is poorly. But what's really cool is as you lean into your faith, as you start trying to live out the general calling that every person has, knowing God, making him known, becoming more like Jesus, bringing more of heaven to earth, you begin to discover your specific calling. Now, I've shared this story before, but as a kid, I was a bit of a shy kid, kind of an insecure kid. And I remember when I was quite young discovering that I was born the day after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I remember thinking as a kid, maybe one day I could grow up to be like him. Now, it was the day before Andy Kaufman, who is a comedian, who most of you have never heard of, but the person who played him in a movie you probably have. His name is Jim Carrey. And they're both pretty much of the same ilk, comedians. And I didn't know exactly, but I wanted to be some sort of combination of Dr. King and Andy Kaufman. And as time went on, I remember being in middle school and high school, and again, I was super insecure, and my parents would push me to do things I had felt absolutely uncomfortable doing. One of them was they wouldn't allow me to drive my car, which I had bought with my money, unless I had a date that weekend. They thought I'd get into too much trouble driving around with my friends, and so they knew that if I was with a girl, I would be on my best behavior. And they made me try out to be a drum major in band. They made me just get beyond my comfort zone. And then I had a youth pastor who invited me to lead this project. And I had these parents and this youth leader who saw in me more than I saw in myself. And it started to help clarify a little bit more about what I was called to do. See, it became more and more clear as you serve others with others, people start to call out spiritual gifts that they see you operating with. And that began to happen to me into my 20s. And eventually in my 30s is when I discovered that combination of Dr. King and Andy Kaufman kind of culminated in, I want to be someone who advocates for those who do not yet believe. I want to be a part of a community that creates space for people who are exploring, that they might feel loved and cared for and might even have fun along the way. What is God calling you to do? And are you living out your purpose? there's an exercise that I created. It's in the Digging Deeper. If you go to gatewaychurch.com/digging deeper, you can find it there. It's a process to create a better future today. Just asks lots of questions about your passions and your past that might help clarify the specific calling that God has on your life. But I want to talk about the general calling. I want to talk about what we were created for. When you look at something and you know what it's for, it gives you a sense of its purpose, right? So when you see this, what do you see? A fork. What do you do with a fork? You eat, right? What does Ariel do with it? She combed her hair, right? She didn't understand what its design was for. Or how about this? When you see these, what are these? Balls, right? What can you do with these? You can juggle them. That's about as good as I get. Something I learned my freshman year in college instead of studying. But when you see these and you know what they're for, you can't help but use them for what they're designed for, right? You want to throw them. Oh, good catch. Anyone else want one? There we go. Real back. Oh, looks like the people that I am aiming for aren't getting it. So sorry. I hope we're covered by insurance. I hope everybody's okay. The catch is don't use what it's for the rest of the service, if you could. But what about this? When you see this, anyone know what this is? We gave these out a long time ago. Anyone remember? It's the Gospel of Mark. Now, you could use it as a coaster, but that's not what it's for. But if you use what it's for, it can actually change your life. We have several copies of these at the Connect spot. And it's especially great if you're exploring God. Just to open this up and say, okay, God, if you're real, show me who you are, and just begin to read through this, the Gospel of Mark. But you see, some of us are like this book. If we're not careful, we'll be more like a coaster and not fulfilling the life-changing experience that God has designed us for. So why are we here? You know, there are lots of philosophers over the years have tried to make sense of the meaning of life. Going all the way back to the Greeks, Socrates and Plato, they found meaning in the pursuit of wisdom and virtue, in the eternal truths that are beyond the material life. But the problem with that is that truth was abstract to them and impersonal rather than revealed through a personal and loving God. Or the Stoics, they say that meaning comes from inner virtue, a rational acceptance of fate, and harmony with nature. But they miss out on the divine intervention and the relational connection with God, and they see suffering as stoically endured rather than something that can be redemptively used by God. Humanists tend to see meaning as created through reason, dignity, and relationships, and service to others, but without appealing to the divine. They rely on human potential and ethics alone. But how often are we unable to live up to our own ethics rather than relying on God's grace and truth and eternal hope? There was a philosopher named James Baldwin who said that meaning is found in truth, love, justice, and courage to be fully oneself amid injustice. Born in 1924. Or from the 1700s, there was Immanuel Kant out of Germany. He said that meaning is acting from moral duty, guided by reason and universal moral law. Or Nietzsche was an existentialist or nihilist, a German philosopher from the 1800s, saying that life has no inherent meaning, but individuals must create their own through strength and art. Or Albert Camus, out of a French-Algerian philosopher from the 1900s who was really the founder of absurdism, saying that accepting the absurd and living passionately and freely despite life's lack of cosmic meaning. See, all of these people were trying to figure out meaning of life. And what's interesting is so many of them found meaning derived from within the person. Now, Immanuel Kant said it was a group of people that would decide what is moral virtue, and it's imposed on everyone else. But if meaning is determined by us, you can see why so many find themselves struggling through life. So what is the point? Is it all absurd? Is it all existential? What if we looked at what the scriptures say is our purpose. There's three things we're going to look at. It's our design and the distortion, but then the decision that we have to make. Let's go to Genesis. At the very beginning, we see that the crowning moment of creation is when God creates humanity. It says this, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground.'" So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." We see our design. We are created in the image of God. It's hard for us to understand how remarkable and beautiful that is. You see, it says that the creatures, the animals in the water, in the sky, and the land were made according to their kind, but we were made according to the image of the Almighty Creator God. In many ways, it was us that he created as his representatives. We are like little idols of God. People could see us and see the real Creator. So then if God is making us as living idols, then we should know what an idol is in the ancient world. Dr. Crispin Fletcher Lewis, a biblical scholar, says it this way: "The role of idols in ancient Near Eastern religion, where an idol is set up to be the real presence of the God, because the God is really believed to inhabit that image. The image is the God, and its proper care and veneration guarantees the God's benefits and protection for the worshiping community. Every ancient Near Eastern religion had a temple, the place where God dwelled, and idols or images were in that temple. And so God sets up humanity as his representation, his likeness in his temple, the earth. According to the Genesis account, God walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. Earth was the place where he dwelled with humanity. We see this explicitly stated in Acts 17:24, which says, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands, and is not served by human hands." He isn't a created thing that needs tending to. He is a living God. And we're to live as his representatives in the world. So now understanding that, let's go back again. Verse 26. God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." So as God's images in the world, we are to subdue and rule over the earth. We're to be fruitful, as well as to fill the earth with the image of God. See, originally we were designed to work with God, to partner with God, to expand paradise. But God, in his love for us, gives us freedom, and in that freedom we chose to go our own way. And as a result, brokenness and separation came between humanity and God. And so when we hear the word subdue or rule, we cannot help but think of it in a negative connotation. But when partnered with God, it actually means to promote flourishing and mutual benefit. To be fruitful points to doing things that produce a good result. Even as we see in the New Testament, Jesus referring to us as being able to bear fruit 40, 60, 100 times what was sown. It doesn't just mean having lots of children. It means having spiritual children, operating with the fruit of the Spirit in our hearts and in our lives. We're to live in the world caring for it in the exact way that God would, as if he was living through us. So how have we done with that so far? Not so good. We've killed, we've started wars, we've oppressed others who don't look like us or we don't understand, and we've done whatever it takes to be the ones in power. We have not partnered with God in this way. So let's make it more personal. How are you doing at living out the image of God in your life? How are you producing fruit that brings flourishing to others? Or if you're honest, do others even see the goodness of God in you or through you? So what does Genesis say about our design, which points to meaning and purpose? We are created to be God's image in the world, his living idols, living as he would live and ruling as he would rule. This is our design. Think about that for a moment. You were created on purpose and with a purpose. God created you, designed you to represent him. What a privilege. What an amazing responsibility that we have. And so let's move forward into an interaction that we see with Jesus in the book of Matthew. Jesus is headed towards Jerusalem, eventually to give his life for you and me. But before that, he confronts the religious leaders. And it is an intense confrontation. A friend of mine, part of our church, for Father's Day last week, decided I get to decide the movie. So they watched The Chosen on Amazon Prime. Him and his 3 little kids and his wife. This is the one that has Jesus holding a whip. And Jesus comes in and he clears the temple. It's based on passages that we can read in the scriptures. You see, the people had been ripping others off. They would come from far distances, unable to bring their own sheep to sacrifice, so they would have to buy the sheep that were provided there, and they were gouging them. They were absolutely ripping them off, and Jesus could take it no longer. In his own righteous anger, in which he never sinned, he cleared out those who were ripping off people who were just coming to connect with God. So they're watching the scene, and the little 5-6-year-old girl says, "Daddy, did Jesus really whip those people?" No, he did not whip the people, but he did have a whip and drove everybody out. Perhaps this is more of a PG-13 version of Jesus, if you watch it. But here's what happens is Jesus clears out the temple, and then these religious leaders who have obviously been called out come to confront him. And there's 3 different questions they use to try to trap him. The first concerns earth, the second concerns heaven, and the third concerns our purpose in life. We're going to have time just to look at the first and the third. But I want to encourage you to go and read all of Matthew 21 through 22 to see the whole interaction. But the first question is focused on this world. It says this in verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. And they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then, what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. So what is going on here, and what does this have to do with our meaning and purpose? Well, let me explain. In the first century in the Roman Empire, the denarius was a coin with a picture of the emperor, who at the time of Jesus was Tiberius. The inscription on the coin would have read something like, "The great Tiberius, Caesar, son of God." And on the other side of the coin would have likely been a picture of either the goddess Roma or perhaps Tiberius' mother, Livia, with the inscription, "High Priestess." The coin was required to pay the mandatory poll tax. Now, this coin was an idol declaring the emperor or Caesar as God. And on the back had another idol of the goddess Roma. Now, Scott McKnight, a biblical scholar, says in his Matthew commentary, by requiring payment via the denarius, Caesar was forcing all subjects of Rome to make a statement to acknowledge symbolically his claims to divinity. So carrying this coin as a Jewish devout follower of God was to carry around an object that was an idol. In the 10 Commandments, Exodus 24 says, You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. So the religious leaders that were asking Jesus this question would have been very aware of this commandment, and they would not be worshiping idols. So Jesus calls out their hypocrisy. He acknowledges up front that he knows they are trying to trap him, and then he lets it play out. He says, "Show me this coin," and someone pulls it out immediately. Meaning they were carrying around the idol that they were so concerned about. Notice Jesus didn't have one. And then it gets worse. He asks whose inscription is on the coin, and they say Caesar's. Remember back in Genesis 1:26 through 27, whose image are we made in? We're made in the image of God. So if they were pure and had not been defiled by the culture around them, buying into the beliefs to get along and not be persecuted, they would have answered this softball question with the answer they knew from memory. Well, Caesar is on the coin and all humanity is made in the image of God. But they didn't. See, Jesus not only teaches us how to be good citizens in a corrupt world, but reminds us that we are created in the image of God. That which belongs to the world can have, but we are not of this world. So that leads to a question regarding distortion. Where have you bought into our culture and been sucked into a distortion of truth? Where are you compromising what God says is good because it is easier or socially acceptable? You know, throughout my time in walking with Jesus over these 30 plus years, I've had to unlearn many things. I've had to take what I think is right to the scriptures, to God, and let go of some of those things. You know, more recently was something that I didn't even know I had fallen into, but it's this Platonic view of the afterlife versus a biblical worldview. Let me explain. See, Plato talked about if you do enough good that you would end up with the Creator. And it was this disembodied state where souls would end up in heaven and bad souls would end up away. But the biblical vision is actually one of renewal of heaven and earth. That there's an end of the story where the new heaven and new earth will return. The goal of life is not just to escape earth. The goal is to help bring more of God's kingdom to earth even now. See, what happens is if we're not careful, we just think that, okay, I got baptized, then the rest is easy. And I've shared this with you before. If it was just about you and Jesus, then we might as well have just kept you under the water so you can go straight to be with him. But we don't. We bring you up out of the water because now you have something to do to bring more of his presence and peace and goodness to the world around us. Now, I learned a lot of this from my favorite author, N.T. Wright, and I had a chance to meet him just a couple weeks ago. Here's a picture with me and him. I've got 27 of his 80 books. He keeps publishing books even in his late 70s. And it's so funny. There was a line of like a 2-hour-long line to meet him. But I sent this picture to my mom, and she sent back this text. She said, "I bet he was thrilled that you wanted this picture." My mom is so positive. No, Mom. He was willing to get this picture. But here's what Dr. Wright says. Jesus' resurrection is the launching of God's new creation, and those who belong to him are invited to share in his mission of renewal. You and I are to bring renewal to the world around us, to bring more of God's presence to the world around us. He goes on to say, God's plan is not to abandon this world, but to renew it, to restore it, to flood it with his presence and love. Are we allowing God to work in us and through us that our neighbors, our coworkers, our family members, our friends can catch a glimpse of God's goodness through how we treat them? Skipping ahead to the third question, verse 34 says this: hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments." Now, this is such a unique moment because there are over 600 commandments in the Hebrew Scriptures, and then religious leaders have added hundreds and hundreds of more. And no one was able to live up to all of this. And so they're asking, trying to trap him, trying to trick him into saying something that would prove their side is right and that he was wrong. But he, once again, was brilliant. And once again, he doesn't follow into their trap. He gives not just one, but two. He says, the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. See, you and I know this. If you've been trying to walk with God, you know that you cannot say, I love God, and not also love people. And it's almost impossible to love people without God's help, let's be honest. But how we love God is demonstrated through how we treat other people. We've been forgiven much, so we should forgive much. He expends grace and sacrifice, and as he did for us, we can for others. See, our purpose, when you're not sure what to do, just love. Love God and love those around you. Do we love like this? How do we know if we're loving God? It's by loving others. In the midst of a world that's filled with division and tension, on the brink of war, what if we were the ones that brought peace to those around us? What if we were the ones that experienced so much of God's presence and peace that it oozes out everywhere we go? That people want what they see and experience through us. You know, today, as part of getting ready for the church has left the building, we have lunch. And if you have time and would like to stick around for a couple hours, we'll provide lunch for you and training on how to share the message of Jesus to those around you. It's completely free. But I want to end with this, a decision. As we're talking about the meaning and purpose of our life, is to live as images of God in the world, to bring his flourishing and mutual benefit to those in the spaces we occupy. Jesus came and perfectly lived as the exact representation of God in the world. And he tells us the goal or aim of life is to love God with our whole being and to love others as an overflow from our relationship with God. Perhaps even looking first for those who feel loved the least. And so we have two options. Do we build and worship idols? Or do we become the representative of God we were created to be? Will we live as images of God in the world, loving God with our whole being, submitting to and following him? Or will we spend our life building and worshiping idols that are lesser things that will never satisfy? You know, Jesus was really hard on those who claimed to know him, yet made it difficult for others to know him. He referred to them as hypocrites. Too often, people who call themselves Christians are seen by the world as hypocrites. What if we were those who follow Jesus, and instead of being known for being judgmental and hypocritical, we were known by our love, by how we cared, by how we served? I want to invite you in this moment just to stand with me. I want to pray for us, that we might be those who bring God's love to the world around us. And then we'll have a chance to sing a song out as a declaration of our hope to be just that. So Heavenly Father, as we come together, I just ask that you would forgive us. Forgive us for living less than our purpose. Forgive us for not being good representatives of you and your love. And God, we confess we cannot do this without your help. So help us to learn how to lean into you, to surrender, to trust, to rest in you, that you might work in us and through us. It's not about mustering up the fruit of the Spirit. It's allowing your Spirit to bring that fruit of joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, gentleness, love, and self-control. So God, we just ask now that you would guide us, show us our next right step in representing you in a beautiful way, the way you've shown yourself to be to us. Hear this song, God, as our call, our prayer, our desire to right size how we see you and how we see ourselves. In Jesus' name.